Oh my God. I am so sorry. I wasn't looking where Here, let me. Right. Sorry. Personal space. I get it. Here.
The coffee hit Young-ho's chest before he even saw it coming. One moment, he was standing in the corridor of Seoul National University Hospital's cardiac wing, examining the outdated patient monitoring system with quiet disapproval. The next, scalding liquid was soaking through his white button-down shirt, spreading across the fabric in a dark, damning stain. Oh my God. The voice was American, distinctly so, with a frantic edge that cut through the clinical silence of the hallway. Young-ho looked up to find a woman frozen mid-stride, her empty coffee cup dangling from her fingers, her mouth forming a perfect O of horror. She was beautiful. Even in his coffee-drenched state, Young-ho noticed. She wore navy blue scrubs that somehow looked tailored to her curves, her natural hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that emphasized the elegant angles of her face. Her skin was a rich brown that seemed to glow under the hospital's harsh fluorescent lighting, and her eyes, wide with mortification, were the color of dark honey. "I am so sorry," she gasped, already reaching for the napkins tucked in her scrub pocket. "I wasn't looking where Here, let me." She moved toward him, napkins outstretched, and Young-ho took an instinctive step back. He wasn't accustomed to being touched by strangers, and the movement was automatic, defensive. The woman froze again, her hands suspended in midair. Something flickered across her face, embarrassment maybe or a flash of hurt, before her expression settled into cool professionalism. "Right," she said, her voice losing its frantic edge. "Sorry? Personal space. I get it." She thrust the napkins toward him instead. "Here." Young-ho accepted them, dabbing uselessly at his ruined shirt. The coffee had already seeped through to his skin, and he could feel the heat of it against his chest. He said nothing, simply watching as the woman shifted her weight from foot to foot, clearly struggling with what to say next. "Look, I really am sorry," she continued, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "I just finished a 14-hour shift and I wasn't paying attention. If you need to file a complaint or whatever, I understand. I'm Jean Okafor, registered nurse, cardiac unit." She gestured vaguely at her badge, which indeed read Jean Okafor, RN in bold letters. Young-ho glanced down at himself, the coffee-stained shirt, the simple black slacks, the lack of any identifying badge or lanyard. He supposed he could see how she might mistake him for, what? A janitor? An orderly? Certainly not the man who had purchased this entire hospital 3 weeks ago for 340 billion Korean wons won. The irony wasn't lost on him. "It's fine," he said quietly, his English lightly accented but fluent. Years of boarding school in Switzerland and university in the States had seen to that. "It's not fine," Jean countered, shaking her head. "That shirt is definitely ruined. I saw you looking at the monitors earlier. Are you with the IT department? Because if you are, I can talk to your supervisor, explain what happened." "IT department," Young-ho repeated, a hint of amusement creeping into his voice despite himself. "Well, you were examining the equipment," Jean said defensively. "And you're dressed pretty casually for admin, so I just assumed." She trailed off, seeming to realize how her assumptions might sound. "Sorry. That was rude. I shouldn't have assumed anything." Young-ho studied her for a moment longer. There was something refreshing about her directness, her willingness to take responsibility for her mistake. In his world, the world of corporate mergers and hostile takeovers and board meetings that stretched into the early hours of morning, people rarely apologized. They deflected, redirected, blamed subordinates. This woman had quite literally spilled coffee on a stranger and was now offering to advocate on his behalf to a supervisor who didn't exist. "The monitoring system is outdated," he said instead of correcting her. "The response time is too slow. If a patient crashes, every second counts." Jean's eyebrows rose. "You're absolutely right. I've been saying that for months, but admin keeps pushing back on the budget for upgrades." She sighed, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "So you are with IT? Something like that. Well, IT guy, I really am sorry about your shirt." She pulled out her phone, tapping at the screen. "There's a great dry cleaner 2 blocks from here. They do same-day service. I'll text you the address and pay for the cleaning." "That's not necessary." "It absolutely is necessary. I ruined your clothes." She looked up from her phone, meeting his eyes with a directness that most people in his life had trained themselves out of. "What's your number?" Young-ho found himself reciting his personal cell number, not his business line, not his assistant's contact, but the number he reserved for family and close friends. He watched Jean type it into her phone, then felt his own device buzz in his pocket. "Again, so sorry about the coffee. Dry cleaner address attached. I'm paying. No arguments. Jean." "There," she said, satisfied. "Now you have my number too." In case you need to follow up about the shirt or whatever. She glanced at her watch and winced. I have to run. Shift change meeting in 5 minutes. But seriously, send me the dry cleaning bill. I will, Young-ho lied. Jean gave him one last apologetic smile, then hurried off down the corridor, her sneakers squeaking softly against the linoleum. Young-ho watched her go, aware of the cooling coffee still clinging to his skin, aware of the inappropriate warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the spilled beverage. His phone buzzed again. His assistant Minjun. Sir, the board meeting has been moved up to 3 p.m. Also, the Seoul Economic Daily wants a quote about the hospital acquisition. How should I respond? Young-ho glanced down at his stained shirt, then back at the empty corridor where Jean had disappeared. Tell them no comment, he typed back. And cancel my 3 p.m. Something's come up. He had a feeling this hospital tour was about to get much more interesting. The Lee and Associates conference room occupied the entire 48th floor of the Gangnam Finance Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Seoul's glittering skyline. Young-ho sat at the head of the obsidian table, fingers steepled beneath his chin, listening to his CFO drone on about projected revenue streams. And with the restructuring of the cardiac unit, we're looking at a 23% increase in efficiency within the first quarter, conservatively speaking. The cardiac unit has a 94% patient satisfaction rating, Young-ho interrupted quietly. Highest in the hospital. Why are we restructuring it? His CFO, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses named Park, blinked rapidly. Well, sir, the current staffing model is inefficient. Too many nurses per patient. If we reduce the ratios to industry standard. For America. Korean hospitals typically run leaner. Young-ho leaned back in his chair, the buttery leather creaking softly. You want to increase the patient load. To maximize revenue per staff member, yes. And patient outcomes? Will remain stable, Park said confidently. The data shows. The data shows that nurse-to-patient ratios directly correlate with patient mortality rates in cardiac units. Young-ho cut in, his voice still quiet but edged with steel. I didn't purchase Seoul National University Hospital to run it into the ground for short-term profits. I purchased it because it's one of the best cardiac centers in Asia, and I intend to keep it that way. Silence fell over the conference room. Young-ho's executive team exchanged glances, clearly recalibrating their approach. He was used to this, the surprise, the subtle resistance. At 32, Young-ho was young for a CEO, young for a billionaire, young for someone who controlled a portfolio of businesses spanning tech, real estate, and now healthcare. He'd inherited Lee Enterprises from his father 5 years ago, back when the company was primarily focused on semiconductor manufacturing. Since then, he'd diversified aggressively, always looking for undervalued assets with strong fundamentals. Seoul National University Hospital had been hemorrhaging money for 3 years, crushed by outdated equipment and poor management. The board had been ready to sell to the highest bidder. Young-ho had stepped in with an offer they couldn't refuse, but with a caveat. He wanted to preserve the hospital's reputation for excellence, not strip it for parts. His executive team was still adjusting to that philosophy. Sir, his COO, a sharp-eyed woman named Kim, spoke up. If we're not restructuring staffing, how do you propose we improve the bottom line? Equipment, Young-ho said simply. The monitoring systems are from 2015. The imaging equipment is older. We update the infrastructure, we reduce diagnostic time, we increase patient throughput without sacrificing care quality. We also cut the administrative bloat. I saw the org chart. We have 3 assistant directors of operations. That's too many. Kim nodded slowly, making notes on her tablet. And the international patient program? Expand it. Seoul is already a medical tourism hub. We position SNU Hospital as the premium option for cardiac care in Asia. Partner with hotels, with airlines. Make it seamless. Young-ho stood, buttoning his Brioni suit jacket, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to his lean frame. I want a full operational audit. Not from you, he added, glancing at his executives. From the staff. Talk to the nurses, the technicians, the people who actually run the hospital day to day. Find out what they need. Sir, Park ventured carefully, that's unorthodox. So am I. Young-ho gathered his things, a slim leather portfolio, his phone. Meeting adjourned. Minjun will send you the timeline for the audit. He left them there, taking the private elevator down to the executive parking garage where his car waited, a Mercedes Maybach S-Class in midnight blue, so dark it looked black until the light hit it just right. His driver, an older man named Kwon, stood beside the open door. Where to, sir? Home, Young-ho said, then paused. Actually, no. Take me to the hospital. Kwan raised an eyebrow but said nothing, simply nodding and closing the door behind Young-ho before sliding into the driver's seat. Young-ho stared out the tinted window as they glided through Seoul's evening traffic, watching the city blur past in streaks of neon and headlights. He'd grown up in this city in a glass and steel penthouse in Hanamdong that his mother had decorated like a museum, beautiful, cold, untouchable. His childhood had been one of private tutors and etiquette lessons, of learning to bow at precisely the correct angle for each social situation, of understanding that his life was not entirely his own. He was Lee Young-ho, heir to the Lee fortune, and everything he did reflected on his family name. Even now, even with his father dead and his mother retired to a Buddhist temple in the countryside, he felt the weight of that expectation. The media called him the monk of Gangnam for his lack of scandal, his absence from the club scene that consumed so many of Seoul's young elite. He didn't date publicly, didn't drink to excess, didn't flash his wealth unnecessarily. He simply worked, built, acquired, expanded. And lately he'd begun to wonder, for what? The Mercedes pulled up to Seoul National University Hospital's main entrance, and Young-ho stepped out into the cool evening air. The building was uglier up close, a squat, utilitarian structure from the 1980s desperately in need of renovation. But inside, he knew, was some of the best cardiac care in the world. He bought it on paper. Now he wanted to see it in practice. Young-ho entered through the main lobby, noting the worn linoleum, the outdated signage, the waiting room filled with anxious families. No one looked at him twice. He dressed down deliberately, foregoing the suit for dark jeans and a simple white button-down, no tie, no badge. He wanted to observe without being observed. He took the elevator to the cardiac unit on the 7th floor, stepped out into a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency, their sneakers squeaking against the floor. Somewhere, a monitor beeped urgently. Young-ho wandered, taking in details. The equipment, yes, but also the atmosphere. The way staff interacted with patients. The small touches, the aromatherapy diffuser at the nurse's station, the children's drawings taped to the wall, the Korean and English signage side by side. He was examining a particularly ancient patient monitoring system when he heard rapid footsteps behind him, then felt the splash of hot liquid against his chest, and looked up into the mortified eyes of the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Young-ho returned to the hospital the next day, this time dressed properly, a navy Tom Ford suit with a subtle pinstripe, crisp white shirt, burgundy tie. His hair was styled back from his face, and he wore the thin-rimmed glasses he usually reserved for board meetings when he wanted to look particularly serious. The hospital administrator, Dr. Choi, greeted him in the lobby with a nervous smile and a too-firm handshake. "Mr. Lee, we're honored to have you here. I've prepared a full tour of the facilities, and the department heads are ready to present." "That won't be necessary," Young-ho interrupted gently. "I'd like to shadow the staff for a few days. Observe normal operations." Dr. Choi's smile faltered. "Shadow the staff?" "Yes. Starting with the cardiac unit. I understand you have an exceptionally skilled team there." "We do, but, Mr. Lee, perhaps it would be more efficient to review our operational reports." "I've read the reports, Dr. Choi. Now I want to see the reality." Young-ho's tone was pleasant but firm. "Please arrange it." 45 minutes later, Young-ho found himself being introduced to the cardiac unit's head nurse, a stern woman in her 50s named Park Sun-hee. She looked him up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen every type of administrator and wasn't impressed by any of them. "You'll observe only," she said crisply in Korean. "No interfering with patient care, no disrupting workflows, no critiquing medical decisions at the moment. If you have questions, save them for the debrief." "Understood." Young-ho found himself suppressing a smile. "Understood. Good. You'll need these." She handed him a visitor badge and a white coat. "Stay close and stay quiet." The morning shift was a controlled chaos that Young-ho found oddly mesmerizing. He watched nurses move with balletic precision, each action purposeful, efficient. They spoke to patients in soft, reassuring tones while monitoring complex arrays of data. They caught problems before they became crises, adjusted treatments, advocated for their patients with doctors who sometimes seemed too busy to listen. It was impressive. More than that, it was humbling. Young-ho was taking notes on his phone, documenting the outdated equipment and the workarounds staff had developed to compensate, when he heard a familiar voice. "Mr. Kim, I promise the test results will be back this afternoon. I know you're anxious, but Dr. Park is the best cardiologist in Seoul. He won't miss anything." Young-ho turned, and there she was, She stood beside an elderly patient's bed, one hand resting gently on the man's arm, her expression radiating calm competence. She wore different scrubs today, deep purple with her name embroidered on the pocket. Her hair was twisted up in a complex style that probably had a name he didn't know, held in place with what looked like wooden sticks. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. As if sensing his attention, Jean glanced up. Their eyes met across the ward. For a moment, he saw no recognition in her face, just professional curiosity about the stranger in the expensive suit lurking near the nurse's station. Then her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she mouthed. Young-ho watched several emotions flicker across her face in rapid succession. Recognition, confusion, mortification, and finally a kind of horrified understanding. She excused herself from her patient and crossed to him in quick strides, keeping her voice low. "You're not IT," she said flatly. "No. You're?" She glanced at his visitor badge, then back up at his face. "Oh my God. You're Lee Young-ho. You're the new owner." "Yes." Jean closed her eyes briefly, and Young-ho could practically see her replaying their encounter in her mind, every assumption she'd made, every casual comment about admin and budget cuts. "I spilled coffee on my new boss," she said to the ceiling. "I'm not your boss," Young-ho corrected. "Dr. Choi is your boss. Nurse Park is your direct supervisor. I'm just the owner." "Just the owner." Jean opened her eyes and fixed him with a look that was equal parts exasperated and amused. "Right. No big deal. I just assaulted a billionaire with a venti latte. Americano, actually. That doesn't make it better." She lowered her voice as another nurse glanced their way. "Why didn't you correct me? Why did you let me go on thinking you were some IT guy?" Young-ho considered the question. "You were honest with me because you didn't know who I was. I wanted to see the hospital as it really is, not as people want me to see it." Jean studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "And what do you see?" "Dedicated staff working with inadequate resources. Excellent patient care in spite of systemic obstacles. A hospital that could be great with the right investment." "And are you planning to make that investment? Or are you here to fire half the staff and sell the equipment to the highest bidder?" The question was direct, almost aggressive. Young-ho should have been offended. Instead, he felt that same inappropriate warmth spreading through his chest. "The former," he said quietly. "I don't destroy things, Ms. Okafor. I fix them." "Jean," she corrected. "If I'm going to keep accidentally assaulting you, we might as well be on a first-name basis." Young-ho. They stood there for a moment, the chaos of the cardiac ward flowing around them like water around stones. A monitor beeped. Someone laughed at the nurse's station. The PA system crackled to life, requesting a doctor in radiology. "I should get back to my patients," Jean said finally. "Of course." She turned to go, then paused. "Young-ho." "Yes. Welcome to SNU Hospital. I hope you like what you see." Then she was gone, moving back into the rhythm of the ward, and Young-ho was left wondering why a simple welcome from a woman he barely knew felt like the most significant thing that had happened to him in years. 3 days later, Young-ho's phone rang at 11 p.m. He was still in his office, the top floor of the Lee Enterprises building, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars. He'd been reviewing the hospital audit findings, making notes in the margins, when the unknown number flashed across his screen. "Yes. Hi, is this Young-ho?" "Lee Young-ho." He sat up straighter. That voice. "Jean?" "Yeah, sorry to call so late. I got your number from, when I texted you about the dry cleaner. Which you never sent me the bill for, by the way. The shirt was already ruined. You don't owe me anything." "That's not how accountability works, but okay." He heard rustling on her end like she was moving around. "Listen, I'm calling because, okay, this is awkward, but I think I broke your hospital." Young-ho blinked. "I'm sorry?" "One of the monitors in the cardiac ICU just completely died. Like died. Won't turn on, won't respond to anything. We have a patient in VTach and the backup system is glitching, and I know it's literally 11 p.m. but you said you wanted to fix things and I don't know who else to call because Dr. Choi doesn't answer his phone after 9 and Nurse Park is going to have an aneurysm if we lose this patient because of equipment failure." "Jean." Young-ho was already standing, already grabbing his jacket. "Breathe. I'm on my way." "You don't have to." "I said I'm on my way. 20 minutes. He made it in 15. The cardiac ICU was controlled chaos when he arrived. Nurses clustered around a patient's bed, manually monitoring vitals while a doctor barked orders. Jean stood at the center of it all, clipboard in hand, calling out numbers with steady precision even though Young-ho could see the tension in her shoulders. He found the head of IT, a tired-looking man named Yoon who'd apparently been called in from home, arguing with a monitor that refused to cooperate. "How bad?" Young-ho asked without preamble. "In jump. Mr. Lee. Sir, the system is outdated, it's been patched too many times, we've been requesting upgrades for 3 years. I know. I read your requests. They were all denied. Young-ho shrugged off his jacket, Armani tonight, charcoal gray with a subtle sheen, and rolled up his sleeves. Can you bypass the monitor? Run the patient on the backup system directly? In theory, yes, but... Do it. I'll authorize the overtime and the parts you need. And tomorrow, I want a list of every piece of critical equipment that's past its service life. Everything. Don't hold back. Yoon stared at him. Everything? Everything. 30 minutes later, the crisis was averted. The patient was stable, connected to a properly functioning backup system. The crashed monitor had been removed for analysis. And Young-ho found himself in the break room, accepting a cup of terrible vending machine coffee from Jean. Thank you, she said quietly. For coming. For not. I don't know, firing everyone for working with garbage equipment. It's not garbage. It's just old. Young-ho took a sip of coffee and immediately regretted it. And this, however, actually is garbage. Jean laughed, the sound breaking some of the tension. Yeah, the break room coffee is legendary. And not in a good way. She settled into the chair across from him, looking exhausted. Her scrubs, mint green today, were rumpled and she'd lost one of the hair sticks somewhere, leaving half her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She was still beautiful. How long have you been on shift? Young-ho asked. Since 6 a.m. I'm pulling a double, we're short-staffed. That's 17 hours. 19 when I'm done. But who's counting? Jean took a long drink of her own terrible coffee. It's fine. I'm used to it. American nursing school doesn't exactly prepare you for work-life balance. You trained in America? Johns Hopkins. Finished my BSN, worked at their hospital for 3 years, then decided I wanted a change of pace. She smiled wryly. Ended up in Seoul. Culture shock doesn't begin to cover it. What brought you here? Jean was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Honestly, I needed to get away from some stuff back home. Family drama, a bad breakup, the usual. And I'd always wanted to travel. Korea seemed different, exciting. Far enough away that I could reinvent myself a little. And have you? Reinvented yourself? I don't know yet. Ask me in another year. She looked up, meeting his eyes. What about you? What made a tech billionaire decide to buy a struggling hospital? Young-ho considered deflecting, giving her the polished answer he gave to journalists and investors. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. My father died of a heart attack 5 years ago. Massive MI in his office. By the time the ambulance got him to the hospital, it was too late. He set down his coffee cup. The doctor said if he'd had better monitoring, if someone had caught the warning signs earlier, he might have survived. So when I saw that SNU hospital was for sale, that it had one of the best cardiac programs in Asia but was failing because of mismanagement and underinvestment, I don't know. It felt like I could fix something. Save something. Jean's expression softened. I'm sorry. About your father. Thank you. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the vending machine the only sound. Then Jean's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. Patient needs me. The glamorous life of a cardiac nurse. She stood, then hesitated. Young-ho? Thank you. Again. For tonight. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. Something passed between them, a connection, a recognition. Jean smiled, small and genuine, and Young-ho felt something in his chest shift and settle like a key turning in a lock. Get some sleep when your shift ends, he said. Only if you do the same. You look like you live in that office. How did you? You have that look. I measure my life in quarterly reports look. Jean headed for the door, then paused to glance back. Life's short, Young-ho. Even for billionaires. Don't forget to actually live it. Then she was gone, leaving Young-ho alone with his terrible coffee and the unsettling realization that a woman he'd known for less than a week had just seen straight through to the core of him. The equipment upgrade started the following week. Young-ho personally oversaw the installation of new patient monitoring systems, state-of-the-art imaging equipment, and a complete overhaul of the cardiac unit's infrastructure. He authorized budgets that made his CFO wince and his COO quietly celebrate. The hospital staff watched with a mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism as their workplace transformed around them. And through it all, Young-ho found excuses to be in the cardiac unit. Checking on the installation. Reviewing the training protocols. Consulting with staff about workflow optimizations. Absolutely not, because Jean worked there. Min-jun, his too observant assistant, said nothing, but the knowing looks were starting to pile up. Young-ho told himself it was professional curiosity. Jean was an excellent nurse, Her patient outcomes were exceptional, her colleagues respected her, and she had an intuitive understanding of the equipment that made her invaluable during the transition. It made sense for him to consult with her. It made sense. "You're lurking again," Jean said without looking up from the medication cart she was organizing. Young-ho, who had indeed been lurking near the nurse's station, straightened. "I'm observing." "Aha." She glanced at him, amusement dancing in her eyes. "You've been observing for 3 days now. The nurses are starting to think you're auditing us. Would it help if I said you're all doing excellent work? It would help if you went back to your glass tower and let us do our jobs without an audience." But she was smiling when she said it, and Young-ho found himself smiling back. This had become their rhythm over the past week. Jean's gentle teasing, his careful responses, a dance of words and glances that neither of them acknowledged but both clearly enjoyed. Young-ho had never been good at flirting. His relationships, such as they were, had always been arranged or transactional, smooth corporate mergers masquerading as romance. This felt different. Real. Dangerous. "There's a new French restaurant opening in Cheongdam-dong tonight," he found himself saying before he could think better of it. "I have a reservation. Would you like to join me?" Jean's hands stilled on the medication cart. For a long moment she didn't respond, and Young-ho felt a familiar anxiety creeping up his spine. He'd miscalculated. Misread the situation. She was going to say no, going to put professional distance between them, going to... "Is this a date?" she asked quietly. Young-ho met her eyes. "Yes. You're my employer. Technically, I'm the hospital owner. You're employed by the hospital administration. That's a technicality, Young-ho?" "It is," he acknowledged. "But it's an accurate one. And if it makes you uncomfortable, I can transfer ownership to a board of directors tomorrow." "I was planning to eventually anyway." Jean stared at him. "You would restructure a 340 billion Korean won's one acquisition so you could take me to dinner?" "Yes." "That's insane." "Probably." She laughed then, helpless and genuine. "You're ridiculous. You know that." "I've been told." Jean looked at him for a long moment, her expression cycling through uncertainty, amusement, and something else, something warm and wondering that made Young-ho's breath catch. "I get off at 7, she said finally. "And if we're doing this, we're doing it properly. I need time to go home and change. Pick me up at 8:30? Young-ho felt something loosen in his chest. 8:30, text me your address. I already have your number, remember? Coffee assault. I remember. Jean shook her head, still smiling, and returned to her medication cart. But Young-ho didn't miss the faint blush on her cheeks or the way her hands trembled slightly as she worked. He had 8 hours to prepare. 8 hours to figure out how to take a woman to dinner without making a complete fool of himself. It should have been simple. It wasn't. Young-ho changed his outfit 4 times. The Brioni suit felt too formal. The Tom Ford felt too corporate. The casual Brunello Cucinelli ensemble felt too studied. Finally, he settled on dark jeans, Dior because he had standards, paired with a black cashmere turtleneck and a charcoal Loro Piana blazer. Simple. Elegant. Not trying too hard. Minjun had walked in during outfit attempt number 3, taken one look at the chaos in Young-ho's penthouse bedroom, and quietly backed out without comment. At 8:25, Young-ho's driver pulled up to an address in Itaewon, an older neighborhood with narrow streets and a mix of Korean and international residents. The building was modest, well-maintained but nothing luxurious. Young-ho climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and knocked on apartment 3B. The door opened, and Young-ho forgot how to breathe. Jean wore a dress, deep emerald green, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that flared softly at her knees. The neckline was elegant without being revealing, and the sleeves were sheer, giving glimpses of her shoulders. Her hair was loose, falling in natural curls around her face, and she'd done something subtle with makeup that made her eyes look impossibly large. She was devastating. "Hi," she said a little breathlessly. "Hi." Young-ho managed to remember basic language skills. "You're beautiful." Jean's smile could have lit up the entire city. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." She grabbed a small clutch, emerald to match the dress, and locked her apartment. "So where are we going?" "You'll see." The restaurant was called La Toile, and Young-ho had rented the entire venue for the evening. Jean stopped in the doorway, taking in the intimate space, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, a single table set for 2 in the center of the room. Candles flickered and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. "You rented out the whole restaurant," she said faintly. "I wanted to talk without being photographed," Young-ho explained. "The media tends to overreact." "Young-ho, this is too much." "Is it?" He pulled out her chair. "Because I can call other people, fill the tables." "Don't you dare." Jean sat, shaking her head. Okay, this is happening. I'm having dinner in a private restaurant with a billionaire. This is my life now. Over courses of foie gras and truffle risotto and perfectly seared duck breast, they talked. About everything. Jean told him about growing up in Maryland, about her Nigerian father and African-American mother, about navigating the expectations of two cultures while trying to forge her own identity. She talked about nursing school, about the first patient she'd lost, about the decision to leave America and the loneliness of reinventing yourself in a foreign country. Young-ho told her about the pressure of inheriting an empire at 27, about his mother's retreat from public life, about the isolation of being Lee Young-ho instead of just Young-ho. He talked about his father's death, about the guilt that still haunted him, about the fear that he was building a legacy with no one to share it with. That's incredibly sad, Jean said softly, her hand finding his across the table. Young-ho looked down at their joined hands, her brown skin against his lighter tone, her fingers warm and solid. Real. It doesn't have to be, he said. Jean's breath caught. Young-ho. I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But Jean, I haven't felt this alive in years. You see me. Not Lee Young-ho the billionaire, not the CEO, just me. And I want to keep being seen by you. This is crazy, Jean whispered. We're from completely different worlds. So I'm a nurse who lives in a studio apartment and can barely afford my student loans. You own hospitals. Plural, probably. 4 actually. Well, 5 if you count the acquisition in Singapore that's pending. That doesn't help your case. Young-ho squeezed her hand gently. Jean, I don't care about different worlds. I care about this. Right now. You and me in this room talking like we're the only 2 people who exist. Don't you feel it? She closed her eyes. I feel it. Then why fight it? Because, Jean opened her eyes and Young-ho saw fear there mixed with longing. Because I've done this before. Fallen for someone who seemed perfect, who promised me everything, who made me feel special. And then reality hit and I realized I was just a novelty. An exotic story to tell at parties. I can't do that again, Young-ho. I can't be your diversity hire or your rebellion against your family expectations or whatever this is. You're not. Young-ho stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. Jean, look at me. Please. She did, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. You're not a novelty, Young-ho said quietly. You're not a rebellion. You're a brilliant, compassionate, fiercely independent woman who spilled coffee on me and then apologized so sincerely I couldn't help but fall a little bit in love with you. And yes, we're from different worlds and yes, this will be complicated, but I don't care. I want to try. If you'll let me. Jean touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. You're really serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Even when you bought a hospital? Even then. She laughed through her tears and then she was kissing him and Young-ho was kissing her back, and the rest of the world dissolved into irrelevance. The photo hit the media 3 days later. Young-ho and Jean leaving Latoile together. His hand on the small of her back. Her laughing at something he'd said. The image was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakable. The headline, Monk of Gangnam breaks vows, Lee Young-ho spotted with mysterious foreign woman. Young-ho stared at his tablet, reading the speculation, the wild theories, the ugly comments. Some praised him for dating outside the typical chaebol circles. Others questioned Jean's motives. A few delved into outright racism. He wanted to sue every publication into oblivion. Sir, Minjun said carefully from the doorway of Young-ho's office. The PR team wants to know how to respond. Tell them no comment. They expected you'd say that. They've prepared 3 alternative statements. Minjun. Young-ho looked up. No. Comment. This is my private life. It stays private. His assistant nodded and retreated, but Young-ho knew the damage was done. Within hours, every major news outlet in Korea would be running the story. His mother would call from her temple retreat. His board would schedule an emergency meeting. And Jean. His phone rang. I saw, Jean said without preamble. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. You didn't take the photo. She sounded tired. But Young-ho, this is what I was worried about. My face is on the front page of the Seoul Economic Daily. I've gotten 17 calls from reporters and I had to disable my social media because the comments were... She trailed off. I'll fix this. How? You can't unring this bell. Jean sighed. I knew dating you would be complicated, but I didn't think it would be international news complicated. Do you want to stop? The question hurt to ask, but Young-ho forced it out anyway. If this is too much, I understand. Silence. Then, no. I don't want to stop. But I need you to be honest with me. What happens now? Do we hide? Do we go public officially? Do I need to prepare for your mother to have me investigated? She already has. Young-ho. I'm joking. Mostly. He wasn't, but Jean didn't need to know about the discreet background check his mother had commissioned and he'd immediately canceled. Look, we don't hide. We don't make a spectacle, but we don't hide. We live our lives and the media can adjust or not. It's their choice. That's very principled. Also probably naive. Probably, Young-ho agreed. But I meant what I said at dinner. I'm serious about you. About us. And I'm not going to let tabloid speculation change that. Another pause. Then Jean laughed, soft and wondering. You really are ridiculous. You know that. So you keep telling me. Good. Don't forget it. Her voice warmed. I have to go. My shift starts in an hour and I'm betting the hospital is about to become a media circus. I'll handle it. My knight in Armani armor. Brioni actually. Of course it is. Jean laughed again. I'll call you later. And Young-ho? Thank you. For not running when things got messy. I don't run. I'm starting to see that. Young-ho did handle it. He issued a brief statement through Lee Enterprises' official channels. I am dating Jean Okafor. She is a remarkable woman and a talented nurse. Our relationship is private, and I ask that the media respect her privacy. Any harassment of Ms. Okafor or her colleagues will be met with legal action. Short, direct, unmistakable. The media predictably lost its mind. But Young-ho also did something unexpected. He showed up at Seoul National University Hospital the next morning, walked through the front entrance with Jean at his side, and calmly ignored every camera that flashed. They had lunch in the hospital cafeteria, bulgogi and kimchi, eaten at a plastic table while staff and patients and visitors stared. Young-ho in his perfectly tailored suit, Jean in her scrubs, acting like it was the most natural thing in the world. Making a statement without saying a word. We exist. Deal with it. The frenzy lasted a week. Then a K-pop idol got into a dating scandal, and the media moved on to fresher meat. But the damage, or perhaps the transformation, was done. Young-ho was no longer the monk of Gangnam. He was the billionaire who'd fallen for a nurse, who'd chosen love over optics, who'd stood beside her in the face of public scrutiny. And Jean was no longer just a foreign nurse in Seoul. She was the woman who'd captured Korea's most eligible bachelor, who'd handled media pressure with grace, who'd refused to be intimidated. They became, against all odds, a team. 6 months later, Young-ho stood in the renovated cardiac unit of Seoul National University Hospital, now boasting the most advanced equipment in Asia, and watched Jean work. She was training a new nurse, demonstrating the updated monitoring system with patient, thorough instructions. Her scrubs were the same navy blue she'd worn the day they met, and her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was perfect. Young-ho had spent the last 6 months learning what it meant to be with someone, truly with them. Not just the glamorous dinners and the charity galas, where Jean wore designer gowns with the same casual elegance she brought to everything, but the quiet moments. Netflix nights in her apartment. Her cooking Nigerian food in his penthouse kitchen while he chopped vegetables badly. Her falling asleep on his shoulder during long hospital shifts. Him learning to take weekends off so they could explore Seoul together. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was love. You're lurking again, Jean said, appearing beside him with a knowing smile. I prefer the term, admiring from a distance. Stalking. The word you're looking for is stalking. But she leaned into him and Young-ho automatically wrapped an arm around her waist. What brings you to the hospital today? I thought you had a board meeting. I did. It ended early. Young-ho took a breath. Jean, can I show you something? Should I be worried? Possibly. He led her through the hospital, up to the top floor, a section that had been under renovation for months. The construction had finished last week, but the space hadn't been officially unveiled yet. Young-ho opened the double doors and gestured for Jean to enter. She gasped. The room was a solarium, glass walls and ceiling offering a panoramic view of Seoul's skyline. But it wasn't the view that made Jean freeze. It was the interior. Plants everywhere, creating a lush garden atmosphere. Comfortable seating arranged in intimate clusters. A small kitchen area stocked with tea and coffee. Soft lighting that could be adjusted for different times of day. And in the center, a plaque, the Jean Okafor Wellness Center. For staff who give everything to care for others. Young-ho, Jean whispered. What is this? A place for hospital staff to decompress. To breathe. To remember that they're human, not just medical professionals. Young-ho moved to stand beside her. You mentioned once that American hospitals have better wellness programs for staff. I thought we should have one too. You named it after me. I did. Jean turned to him, tears streaming down her face. This is the most thoughtful, ridiculous, over-the-top thing anyone has ever done for me. Wait until you see what else I did. He pulled out his phone, showing her the documents he'd signed that morning. The full transfer of Seoul National University Hospital to a non-profit board. The endowment he'd created to fund ongoing improvements. The scholarship program for nursing students. The complete separation of his ownership from the hospital's operations. You said it bothered you, Young-ho explained. That I owned the hospital where you work. So now I don't. I'm just a major donor. The board runs everything. Jean stared at the documents, then at him, then back at the documents. You restructured hundreds of billions of won because it bothered me? Yes. Young-ho, you can't just, that's insane. You've mentioned that before. She laughed, helpless and overwhelmed. What am I going to do with you? Young-ho reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Jean's laughter died. You could marry me, he suggested quietly. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds set in platinum. The emerald was the exact shade of the dress she'd worn on their first date. Young-ho, Jean breathed. I know it's fast, he said. I know we've only been together 6 months. I know there will be complications, cultural differences, media scrutiny, my family, your family, all of it. But Jean, I love you. I love your compassion and your strength and the way you call me out when I'm being ridiculous. I love that you spilled coffee on me and apologized so sincerely I couldn't help but fall for you. I love you and I want to spend my life with you if you'll have me. Jean touched the ring with shaking fingers. This is an emerald. Your birthstone. May. You remembered. I remember everything about you. She looked up at him, tears streaming freely now. You really are serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Even when you bought a hospital? Even then, Young-ho echoed their conversation from 6 months ago, and watched Jean's face break into that radiant smile he'd fallen in love with. Yes, she whispered. Yes, you ridiculous, wonderful man. I'll marry you. Young-ho slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and the Seoul skyline sparkled around them like a benediction. The wedding was private, just family and close friends in a small ceremony at a temple in the mountains. Jean wore a custom Alexander McQueen gown, white with emerald accents. Young-ho wore a Tom Ford tuxedo and cried when he saw her walking down the aisle. The reception was held at the Lee Estate in Hanam-dong, transformed for the evening into an elegant garden party. Lights strung through trees. A jazz band playing softly. Tables laden with both Korean and Nigerian delicacies. Young-ho stood on the terrace, watching Jean laugh with his mother, who had, surprisingly, warmed to her future daughter-in-law after a single conversation about cardiac care protocols. His wife. His partner. The woman who'd spilled coffee on him and changed his life forever. You look happy, Minjun said, appearing beside him with champagne. I am happy. It's a good look on you, sir. Young-ho accepted the champagne, smiling. Thank you, Minjun. For everything. Just doing my job. No. You've gone beyond. Far beyond. I appreciate it. Minjun nodded, then hesitated. Sir, if I may ask, do you ever regret it? The hospital, the media attention, all the complications. Young-ho looked at Jean, his beautiful, brilliant wife, currently showing his mother how to do a complicated braided hairstyle while his mother looked genuinely delighted. Not even for a second, he said. That night, after the last guest had left and the staff had cleared away the celebration's remnants, Young-ho and Jean stood in the penthouse that was now their home. Seoul glittered beneath them, infinite and alive. I still can't believe this is real, Jean said softly, leaning against him. That I'm married to you. That this is my life. Young-ho wrapped his arms around her. Believe it? You're stuck with me now. Lucky me. She turned in his embrace, smiling up at him. Thank you, Young-ho. For taking a chance on the nurse who assaulted you with coffee. Best assault of my life. Jean laughed and Young-ho kissed her, and somewhere in the city below, in a hospital with state-of-the-art equipment and a wellness center named for a remarkable woman, a nurse saved a life, and another day began. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy our stories, you can join our membership by clicking on the link in this video description box.